Naofumi Iwatani, the Shield Hero. Probably one of my favorite anime protagonists, and one of the better ones I've seen for quite some time. It's kind of funny because before doing this video, I took a quick look into why people thought this series was controversial and why Naofumi was supposedly a controversial character. Because I never found him to be particularly morally gray or controversial in any real sense. He always kind of seemed like just a flat out hero to me. So I'm not really sure why that is exactly. Maybe it's just because I don't really have liberal political or social values. So a lot of the things he does that people think are questionable, I don't really think are there's anything wrong with them. I think it also kind of comes down to how your system of morals or ethics works. So there's a couple different ones. There's obviously consequentialism, which is what matters is what the outcome of the action is. So if something good happens as a result of the action is good. If something happens as bad as a result of the action is bad. Then you also have like intent. If someone intends to do a good thing with an action, then the action is good. Then you'll have the ends don't justify the means, and some actions are inherently good, some actions are inherently bad, or rather, an action is good or bad, and there isn't any modification to it. So, like, killing is always bad or killing is always good, and there's not really any kind of situational aspect to it. And then there's virtue ethics, where generally speaking, a person's actions are good or bad, stemming from whether or not the person is inherently a good or bad person. And so I think a lot of the people who don't like Naofumi take a very, I don't know what you could call it, action based version of morality, where they kind of ignore the context of things he does, the reasons for them, and what the results are, and just focus on specific things he does in a vacuum. And I think that's kind of the reason why he's a controversial figure. But to me personally, I just don't see him as one at all. And another person who's kind of like that for me is Lelouch. Because everyone, I think, feels that Lelouch is like really morally gray and that sort of thing. And I think when he started out, it was more just about a selfish desire for revenge. But as time went on, it more and more did come from a desire to build a better world in which people could be happy. So by that logic, I don't really consider Naofumi to be really an anti-hero. He's just a hero who's a bit grumpy and is pragmatic in his desire to do the right thing. I think Naofumi's motto would be, if you're going to do the right thing anyways, you might as well not do it for free, or you might as get paid for doing it. So let's just maybe go into a bit, now that I've given that preface, into Naofumi's backstory, his actions, and I think what it can tell us about him. Now, Shield Hero is an Itsukai, so Naofumi comes from our world and gets transported into the fantasy world. I forget if it has a name, but just the Shield Hero fantasy world. And when he first comes in, he's very idealistic. He's very much I don't know, I guess you could say a wide-eyed idealist. He's like, oh, this is so cool. I'm in a video game. This is going to be great. Everything's going to go awesome. And he is very much like kind of a traditional anime protagonist who's just kind of very sweet, like very kind of traditional hero. And in the first episode of Shield Hero, he obviously gets framed by Mine, who's like this super waifu who joins his party and flirts with him. And she claims that he raped her or tried to rape her. And everybody hates him and shits on him. And everyone basically tries to like scam him. Yeah, so there are people who are like trying to scam him. People throw stuff at him. People treat him like shit. They call him like a rapist and a monster and a shield demon and stuff like that. And as a result of that, Naofumi becomes fairly cynical, kind of grumpy, and very suspicious of other people. And you can say that these are these are anti-hero traits, but in like the context of what happened to him and how many times people have tried to screw him and steal from him, I think it really makes sense that he's very suspicious and skeptical whenever something nice happens to him in that kind of situation. Like he very rarely, I don't really recall him ever trying to cheat someone or stealing from someone unless they really deserve it. But he does tend to assume that people are trying to screw him because they are in most cases. In most cases, people hate him and they're trying to take his money or sabotage his journey. So, like, generally speaking, when he interacts with people, and he gets better at this as time goes on, he's very kind of hostile and guarded, and he doesn't want to kind of get involved in things. And you can say that's kind of an anti-hero trait, and that would be something an anti-hero does. But within the context of the story, I think it makes a lot of sense. Generally speaking, though, whenever the chips are down and people are legitimately in trouble or legitimately need saving, he will kind of groan, roll his eyes, and get done what needs to get done. But he won't do it in a very, like, knight in shining armor. There's a trope, knight in sour armor, and Naofumi is very much knight in sour armor because he'll groan. He doesn't want to go out his way, but he will do it. I don't know if there's any real time in the series where he doesn't wind up doing something. Sometimes it takes Raphtalia to guilt him into doing things as kind of his conscience. But like I said, he always does it in the end. And when he does do something good, he does it in a very effective, pragmatic way. So he tries to solve problems in a way where they'll stay solved and they won't explode in his face or in the face of people he helps like 5 seconds later. And once again, that can be a little, I guess, kind of unnerving for some people. And I said this in my reaction review of Shield Hero, but Naofumi very much comes across as like a fanfic. So there's fan fictions for things like Pokemon or like Ascension's a really good example of this, or I'm just trying to think, Harry Potter or Naruto, where the people just break canon because they basically are, you know, whenever you're watching something and you yell at the TV and you're like, just do this, just do that. Why is this person so stupid? Naofumi is basically if you took one of those fanfic writers and put them into an isekai. So he kind of like power games and figures out ways to break the system. And partially because he has such limited resources at the beginning because his money gets stolen. And on top of his money getting stolen, he doesn't get very much support from the king and people try to cheat him. He kind of has to come up with his own funds. And it's just always kind of a thing in a lot of RPGs where you just help people out because it's the right thing to do. You don't expect any reward. Maybe you get a reward, but it's not expected. And Naofumi doesn't really want to do anything without getting paid. And to be fair, he's the one who's like traveling across the world. He needs to equip himself with his party. He has like to buy food and clothes and stuff like that. He can't afford to do things for free. He does work on a sliding scale though. So basically anyone can afford his services. He just takes what they can get. So he'll take produce sometimes. He'll take herbs that he can make into medicines and resell. He'll take ore. And he has a card, and he very much does a lot of like dealing as a merchant and that kind of thing. And he like power games and tries to get like his skills leveled up in a certain way that can help him make money and that can help play off other things. So he's a hero who's very kind of stingy, and I don't think greedy is the real term. He's just very money conscious, and it deals a lot with kind of the economics of the situation, which is something a lot of other animes don't deal with, or a lot of other RPGs don't deal with. And so it can kind of come across as him being money grubbing and greedy to some people, but I don't think that's really a fair appraisal of him. So you have that aspect of him. I think another thing is just some of the stuff he does, maybe to a liberal mindset, once again, if you ignore the context of the situation, may look bad on the surface. So very early on, because he gets betrayed and gets Me Too'd and there's a fake rape accusation, he doesn't really trust anybody to not try to screw him and steal from him, which is very understandable given the circumstances. So it's suggested to him that he goes and buys a slave, because in this world, slaves have slave crests that prevent them from harming their master and not just prevent them from harming their master, but force them to do whatever their master tells them to do. So Naofumi really has no other way of recruiting someone reliable, and it's kind of his job to save the world. So he goes to buy a slave, and I guess a lot of people, myself among them, don't like slavery and think it's evil and think it's bad. And I do object strongly to the idea of owning another person. But in the context of the situation, it's kind of A, it's acceptable in this world, and B, you kind of got to do what you kind of do if you're a legendary hero and the apocalypse is coming. At his credit, the slave he winds up buying, Raphtalia, is like a sad, pathetic. She has like an illness. She's malnourished. And almost immediately, like the first thing he does is he takes her to get medication. He buys her new clothing. He feeds her well. But at the same time, he expects her to be his. Their relationship is she's his sword and he's the shield. And people might say, well, he should have just done that stuff and bought her and helped her out without expecting anything in return. And I think what people have to understand is you can have multiple reasons for doing something. In fact, if you're intelligent, you should try to do things for multiple reasons. Like you might do something because you believe in it, and you're doing it out of altruistic reasons, but also you make money at it. These things aren't mutually exclusive or really contradictory. Naofumi, I think, very much is moved by a desire to help and protect Raphtalia, but he also needs a sidekick to do the fighting because he has no offensive potential whatsoever. So I don't really see if there's any problem with him using her as both his very much his daughter figure at that point in the series that he cares about, and also a fighter. Likewise, when he gets Philo, she's very much also a daughter figure to him, but he also expects her to pull the cart, which she loves doing, and to fight at the same time. And once again, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. He would die to defend his party, and I mean, the world is facing an apocalypse, and if everyone doesn't fight and do their best, everyone's going to die anyways. And both Philo and Raphtalia are very strong and effective fighters. So, yeah, he's obviously got to do what you got to do. And this is very much contrasted with the other heroes who view the whole world like a video game. And because they get direct funding from the king, they don't really need to worry about economics nearly as much. So they kind of view Naofumi as money grubbing and greedy and stuff like that. Well, when you think about it, Naofumi, generally speaking, gets money for providing a good or service. Like he makes medicine to sell to the apothecary, whereas the other people are taking what's essentially taxpayers' money. So it's kind of interesting from that perspective that Naofumi's kind of engaging in more a mutual beneficial transaction rather than taking up tax dollars. Not that there's anything wrong with using tax dollars to outfit heroes who are trying to save the world, but yeah, so there's that aspect to it. Also, the other heroes are just completely incompetent at doing the right thing. So, like, at one point, they kill a dragon zombie and they just kind of leave the corpse there. And the corpse is like this giant, rotting, poisonous dragon corpse, so it infects the local water supply and kills a bunch of people. Another guy starts a revolution and doesn't stay behind to ensure stability afterwards, and the country just collapses into anarchy or civil war, and it's much worse than the tyrannical lord who was there in the first place. And just a lot of stuff like that happens. One of them gets like a magic seed that grows really quick, and he thought he solved the village's hunger problems, but the magic seed was like sealed away for a reason, and it winds up destroying the village because it just grows too fast and too much. So, like I said, Naofumi, whenever he resolves these things, he resolves them permanently. And he does it in a way that leaves the people at least the same off as they were before he came in to solve the problem. And I don't think there's ever any indication that bad things happen after he leaves a particular area. Generally speaking, the people are mutually satisfied with their agreement. And once again, okay, he doesn't do maybe the most obvious heroic thing, like run in and go, I'll save you all. You don't have to pay me. You don't have to thank me. And sometimes he like holds out until they offer to pay him before he does something. But like I said, that's just kind of the reality of the situation. So I think a lot of people dislike him for that reason. There's also, once again, the whole slave issue. Raftelia falls in love with him very shortly after she grows up, and I'm sure a lot of people consider this like rape or something like that, or oh, it's because of the power dynamics where she's a slave and he's the master, and he's taking advantage of her. There's no actual indication of that whatsoever. Now Fumi basically sees her like a daughter, and I think it takes a lot of pushing on her side to get him to see her as a woman. But there's like some idea that because he's the master and he's kind of theoretically the superior in some role in their relationship, that automatically makes it rape. And once again, that would just never really occur to me. For it to be rape, he would have to like coerce her or force her or manipulate her or something like that. But she just seems to have genuinely fallen in love with him because she understands him better than most people and she thinks he's a really great guy. So there's stuff like that, and then like after Raftelia gets freed, she wants to go back to being his slave, and people I think got angry about that. It's like, oh, it's demeaning to women, and it's, I guess to her mind, it's kind of almost like a wedding ring where she wants to stay by Naofumi's side forever, and that's a way of doing it by ensuring that she'll always be his sword. And once again, it's very much kind of a irrelevancy because he doesn't use the slave crest to control her, and he doesn't make her do anything that she doesn't want to do. And once again, like I said, he's just very kind of grumpy and dismissive with people, where he's not really interested in other people unless they're going to give him something. He doesn't really like the other heroes. He doesn't want to cooperate with them. He doesn't want to work with the king. But these people were all massive dicks to him and ruined his life. So it's pretty understandable that he hates them and that he wants to see them suffer. It's a very just normal human reaction. And in the end, he does wind up taking the high road and goes and decides not to kill the people who wronged him. But I guess because he enjoyed seeing their downfall, that was like made him bad. And then the other thing people said that was controversial is at the end of season 1, he becomes a feudal lord. So he finds the ruins of Raftelia's village, and he asks the queen to make him the lord of the region as kind of a reward. And he's going to rebuild the village as a place where demi-humans who are hated and discriminated against within the human kingdom can go and live as kind of a sanctuary town. And some people are like, oh, well, he becomes a feudal lord and feudalism is bad and he should set up a democratic republic or something in the area. And I don't know, he just kind of takes the world as it is and realizes he's not really in a position to fundamentally change things. He can just try to deal with what he has, and that there's a limit to how much he can inject the morality he learned in this, the kind of social norms, not even the morality, but the social norms he learned in this world into this foreign, strange, alien place. So overall, I think Naofumi is a really interesting example of a hero who's not an anti-hero, but has kind of some traits of that. It is maybe a bit more pragmatic and believable, but that makes him a lot more interesting, and it gives him a lot more depth than a lot of just kind of the generic good guy heroes. Not that there's anything wrong with the generic good guy hero, but it's nice to see kind of some variety and them to kind of take a different spin on what can be a very repetitive, stale genre. So overall, I do like Naofumi a lot. He's probably one of my favorite anime heroes at this point in time. So God bless. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you all later.